Okay. Alrighty. Welcome today. Happy 2023. Today we wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of like metal culture or metal like questions, metal genre stuff, like kind of cover some of those things because um, there's a lot of conversations that we've had in the last like however many years that have kind of just like we've like wondered certain things about or just I don't know. We had a lot of questions, so we kind of wanted to discuss those a little bit, but we wanted to make sure we discussed it with you guys also because there's certain sort of ideas in the metal culture that seems like, oh, it's this way or that way. And, not everybody feels the same way. Like so we wanted to kind of talk about it, some of that stuff. So we're going to basically model this video after kind of like our other video.
Right.
I'm going to be the moderator this time. I'm going to ask these questions, and then Kevin and Chad and myself, we're all going to kind of answer them. And we're hoping that this will spark kind of a cool like discussion about these things, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. So anything you guys want to say before we begin? Or before I start?
I'm kind of glad that we're doing this and whatnot because I gotta stop saying whatnot. I realize I say whatnot for a lot of things, but maybe it's just that nervous energy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we're doing this because, like Ian said, we talk a lot amongst ourselves about like metal and this person said this about this metal genre or that or whatever, and some of it's good, some of it's bad, and there's just a lot that's sort of like consensus, that we're just like, oh well, some of it we might not agree with, and so almost said that we're, but I'm kind of glad that we're gonna be able to talk about some of these things. We can't cover everything, but like we can talk about
a little bit,
yeah,
a little here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be cool if anybody has any thoughts. If anybody listens to this, like it'd be cool to hear your guys' thoughts too. So
yeah, like what metal means to you as a viewer and whatnot. I gotta stop saying whatnot.
Dude, just who cares?
Yeah,
like,
I'll just
Who
go
cares?
with it. But yeah.
Anything you want to add, Chad, before I begin, or?
No, let's just jump into it.
Alrighty, that's the spirit of metal.
yeah. See?
Alrighty. So the first question, and I'm gonna throw this to Kevin. The first question that we talked about these beforehand, but is what makes you a metalhead? Like, how would you define yourself as a metalhead? Are you a metalhead? What are your thoughts? What makes you a metalhead?
For me, I think being a metalhead is like first and foremost it's the music, the music that you listen to. But I don't feel like I'm a metalhead like other metalheads. You know what I mean? I feel like I'm coming from a different place. Growing up, my influences, my views on life and everything. I think I've tailored metal to sort of my own personality. And then like it's just not the same as other metalheads. And I wonder if it's just like I was thinking about like are there just some like extrovert metalheads that are different, introvert metalheads that are different and whatnot, different people just having different personality quirks or whatever. But for me, like metal is very much like an individualistic journey. Like you have to be true to yourself, follow your heart and whatnot throughout life. And that's like the most metal thing that you can be and whatnot. And I've tried to live that way and not, I guess I'll share real quick. Growing up in the 90s and whatnot, that Offspring song, like, Pretty Fly for a White Guy, in the 90s, if you were like a wannabe, that was like the worst thing you can be. And so I remember growing up being like, no, I'm going to be who I want to be. I'm not going to tailor or change who I'm going to be to try and win friends or to get popularity points or this or that. And because like, I saw the kids who were frauds and like they got ridiculed and mistreated and, whatever. And it was just kind of like, that was a code that I took with me at a very young age of like, don't be a wannabe, be yourself. And as long as you're true to yourself and whatnot, then yeah, it will, that's like the most metal thing you could be because it's honesty. I guess with metal is very honest to me. And I think that that's what makes you like a metalhead.
It's not sugar coated. It's fudging
It just that's for me how I view myself. Like if I'm doing something that I'm not happy with in my personal life or whatever, then it'd be like, man, that's not a metal thing to do, you know. And so I guess I tie it.
What would Jesus do?
Right. What would metal do? Yeah. I guess I do tie it into that sort of like being determined, being confident, being hardcore, and being resilient to outside pressures and whatnot. So
Be who you want to be, not a wannabe.
Yeah.
just who you want to be, you will be in the end.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Chad, same question. What makes you a metalhead? Like, how would you?
Dude, long hair.
Yeah, dude, this is all you need, man, right here. I know I follow some of the tropes definitely, but I don't know, we were kind of talking about this. I'm trying to figure out, like for me personally, I think I'll just copy Kevin. No, I do agree with a lot of what Kevin said. I think it is very individualistic. I think it's going against the grain, and not in like a traditional sense, just in whatever to you, like whatever you see and that you don't agree with, just kind of like forging your own path, going your own way. Like that's metal to me. Like I even remember being around like the punk rock kids, and it was like everyone had to wear a uniform, everyone had to believe the same thing, and I was just like, dude, what is this? Like this is like groupthink and freaking mob mentality, and I wasn't about any of it. So I don't know. I always just wanted to be who I wanted to be. And of course, like I found to some stuff where, I mean, I listened to new metal in middle school for fuck's sake.
A lot of people did. Like it was really big.
And I don't care. Like it's okay to like new metal again. So you know whatever. But yeah, I guess being a metalhead, like it's just metal's always been an important like thing for me. It's gotten me through rough times. It pumps me up. It entertains me. Like I don't know exactly what to say about like what makes me a metalhead, but I just know I am one. If that makes any sense.
I was born that way.
I was born that way, dude. Like I can't help it. And I don't know. Maybe hearing from Ian will spark something else, but that's kind of all I got for now. So hopefully it made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit like, I don't really define myself as a metalhead, but I can still answer this question, what makes you a metalhead, you know? And I think that a lot of times, you know, like the normal, traditional, like what kind of music you enjoy, metal music, you're probably a metalhead. That's like the basic kind of...
mention
music,
but...
yeah, that's like the basic. Yeah, but what's funny is like, along with that music comes certain like identities, certain sort of like ideas, ideologies that kind of comes along with metal music. And so many times people gravitate to those ideas and energies and ideologies or whatever, like a lot of traditional metal, like be, you know, whatever, or like thrash, you know, like, oh yeah, you know, distrust authority,
question everything,
like, yeah, like, you know, and like new metal, like fudge your parents, you know.
It was more than that.
But you know what I mean, like there was always kind of like some sort of like slant or some sort of idea associated with these genres, and I don't think that, and I'm using those as like kind of like a very basic kind of thing. I know that all of those don't define those genres. Right. People talk about all sorts of different things, but what's interesting about folks being like, oh, this is metal and I'm metal and whatever, is kind of like how much they gravitate to certain ideas that they just like, you know, like, you know, you mentioned like honesty, and you mentioned not giving in a group think and stuff, and like, you know, there's these general sort of themes with metal of like either being competent, being strong, you know, being true to yourself, you know, fighting the world, whatever. And I feel like those traits and those ideas definitely resonate, you know. So in that regard, yeah, I guess I'd feel like I'm a metalhead. I mean, I love a lot of metal, but I love all these other kinds of things and other kinds of music and stuff. So I don't really feel like...
just real quick, do you feel it's like restrictive to like say, label yourself a metalhead, or like what exactly?
I'll be asking the question. No, I'm messing. No, yeah, I do kind of feel like it is, because like you said, I had those same kinds of feelings of like, I grew up with like punk rock and stuff is also in metal and whatnot. And I saw so many scene kids and so many folks that were just kind of like, yeah, we're all part of a group and we're all metalheads. And I didn't like fit with them. And this will kind of go into our next question. So I kind of like, I really do feel like, I don't want to be a part of like because I don't want to be associated with only like one thing. I'd rather be kind of more to me than just this one identity or this one. Yeah. I'd rather and I don't want to dress in a certain way to say, here's what I am right on the surface or whatever. Like if someone wants to get to know me, then cool. But if they don't want to get to know me, that's fine too. And I'm not saying other people have to dress metal or not metal, you know.
It's definitely a thing though.
It's definitely a thing. I mean, look at Kevin here, Dark Twinkle is such a fucking cool guy.
I agree with you. To me, if you something feels wrong about it if you want to join the metal group and so then you change your identity or you change the way you look just to join a group, just to adopt, and then they start telling you what to think, what you should believe,
what bands about. You should like.
You should think this way about religion. You should think this way about politics. You should think this way about bands. It's funny because like growing up and stuff, I loved like Savage Garden. I still love Savage Garden. Yeah. But that would be like well that would be like there would be like a kid that liked Slipknot or something, and the cultural world would look at that and be like, oh, you, Kevin, are not a metalhead because you like Savage Garden. But him, he likes Slipknot, so he's a metalhead. And that's how culture decided it. And I thought that there was something wrong with that because it was very surfacey. Yeah, very surfacey. And I guess I feel like to be a metalhead, you have to like kind of prove it with your actions and whatnot. Because... and we talked about this a little bit, like how you're buying the albums, you're reading the liner notes and whatnot. Yeah. You're not doing it to fit in and stuff. Yeah. You're doing it because you believe in it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very important.
Another thing that's really funny too is like it's funny looking back on the high school days because they're different now. Like 15 years later for all of us, But those years were very formative because those years were years that I did get into a lot of metal and stuff. But it's really funny how a kid, like if you viewed me in high school, you would just see like some kid, you're like, I don't know about him. But I was playing freaking Yngwie Malmsteen, with you on stage for our senior like farewell thing or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's like nobody would have guessed that. Nobody would have known that I played guitar and he played drums, and that we even listened to Yngwie Malmsteen in general. Most of the metal kids had no idea who he even was. They didn't know much about they kind of like a lot of the scene metal kids were kind of more just in metalcore, new metal kind of stuff. Occasion like Metallica or like maybe they'd have Iron Maiden shirts, but they rarely listened to it. That was kind of the impression that I got, and it was weird because in high school. I was like listening to all these kinds of bands and whatnot, and all these kids didn't know them. So because they didn't know any of those bands, it was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm not as a metalhead, but I also didn't dress like they did. I didn't have like chains and stuff and black clothes and whatnot, So it's weird how, but it's weird how like certain kids like they will identify a certain way on the surface so that they could kind of like belong in a group or something. I don't know.
And I don't blame like the normal regular people for not understanding, or you know what I mean? It's not up to them. You should know better. Who's a real metalhead? Yeah. That's stupid. It was problematic when you would try and make friends with someone and thinking like, oh yeah, you're a metalhead, I'm a metalhead too. But then when you exchange music and stuff, they're like, this is metal. And then and then you share your metal, and they're like, that's not metal. And then you're just like, what?
Yeah.
It's strange.
It's strange because it's so disconnected. And this may be different for people that didn't grow up in the U.S. and people that, because we were growing up in high school in the like early mid 2000s. That was kind of like our high school days. So you guys may have a different experience, but this is kind of our experience of like, me and Kevin, and Chad has a different experience altogether too. Like for us, we're all into these metal bands from Scandinavia and like Germany and whatnot. We like the American stuff too, like especially the thrash scene in America. But we weren't really on board with a lot of the groove metal and nu metal stuff. Granted, we did like a lot of nu metal stuff. But yeah, we just weren't really big into like the metal kids that we saw. They were into stuff like Marilyn Manson, Korn, Slipknot, you know,
Pantera.
Avenged Sevenfold, Pantera,
Mudvayne.
Mudvayne, whatever, you know, like, and for us, we didn't really enjoy that stuff, but because we listened to metal that none of them knew, and they were the majority kind of force, you know, it led to this sort of weird kind of like, I mean, at the time, you know, I was like more like arrogant or like, I'm the true metal, these guys are posers and whatever, you know. Nowadays, it's been fun to revisit some of that music that I used to frown on because it was associated with these quote unquote scene kids. And then I started learning to like it. Like some Pantera, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And like Slipknot, I was kind of like, oh yeah, now I'm actually like kind of enjoying it more.
There's some angsty
Yeah.
type songs and stuff, but then there's some angsty like bands that I do like.
Yeah.
And it's weird that like, you know, I like Snot, you know, and Snot could be one of those bands that people are like, wow, you like this? And I'm like, I guess so. You know, it's strange, but sometimes you know, a band works for you and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know.
But even at shows and stuff, like what's funny is the first couple shows that I went to, I remember me, Kevin, and our friend Jake, we'd go to shows. And I think I wore like a metal shirt in like not in the very first show, you know, the very first show, I didn't even have any metal shirts, so I didn't wear any metal shirts. But then like the next couple, like I started wearing metal shirts. And then I just felt weird because I was like, everybody's wearing black, everybody's wearing metal shirts. Yeah. And I get why it's like cool to see all the different bands. It's fun to kind of like show off what bands you enjoy and stuff. Like that's kind of like a big part of it. But I still felt like it was a little bit weird to be in the sea of people. Like I just didn't want to be like just pigeonholed as, you know, and some folks may think that, oh, well, you're just being a contrarian, you know. And for me, it doesn't feel like it's a contrarian. I felt like I was being more true to myself by not wearing stuff that I didn't feel like I had to wear to prove to anybody that I was metal or anything, you know? I don't know.
And these are just our general thoughts and stuff. Like, we don't want to tell you that you have to do this or you have to do that. I think the general consensus with us is like, just be true to yourself. If you're not comfortable wearing I wear more band shirts than Ian does, but I don't tell Ian like, come on, put your band shirts on. You know, I don't.
Times.
like we'll joke about it. We'll joke about it with Ian, but like, you know, I remember going to the 70,000 Tons of Metal cruise, and that was a blast. Great week, you know. But if Ian came with me on that cruise, I would be totally okay standing with him just wearing a white shirt or a regular, you know, wearing this shirt or whatever. You know,
I am wearing black. What am I doing?
You know, like, and it wouldn't bother me because it's like I know the internal. Yeah. The internal is what matters, and so
should we move on to the next question? I know we're kind of covering it.
Yeah, we kind of got the community thing. I'm kind of looking forward to the community thing.
All right, so this will kind of like, we're kind of like bleeding into it, but that's okay. The next question is metal, quote unquote, metal, a community? And this is an interesting question because like, and I guess I'm going to start with this because the idea that metal is this sort of community of like brotherhood and whatnot, I never really experienced that, you know. I always found that people had such wide taste in metal that it was almost like you couldn't like get along. Like you couldn't really like, I didn't see eye to eye with all the metalhead people I you know, when I was growing up, and they didn't see eye to eye with me either, you know. So in a way, it just kind of seems like I think that metal community probably was more prominent, and people that are older, I wonder if you guys might have like a perspective on this that maybe I don't, you know, because in the old days, maybe there was like barely any metal bands, you know, when you've only got like Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and, you know, like kind of, and then maybe like some underground bands or something, but that's kind of it. And you're kind of like, yeah, you know, this is metal, you know. Did that sort of unify? And then the fact that there's so many genres, so many bands, so many whatnot, does that make it so that the metal community is less like unified in a way? Like I kind of wonder that, you know. I don't really feel like it is super unified because I do feel like it's hard to unify a group of people when everybody's told to think what they supposed to, you know, like everyone's told to think what you want to think because everybody has different ideas on what this is, what that is. So in a way, I almost feel like, because it's weird because like so many people found metal to be something that they belong to, or they found a community, found a home in metal. You know, I never did. But like earlier this year or last year, we watched that Metal Headbangers Journey documentary or whatever, Sam Dunn documentary, and we've seen that since like high school. But it was fun to just go back to it. But the thing that stood out with that documentary is how many people that they interviewed were like, yeah, I feel safe when I'm wearing my metal stuff, and like, you know, they don't judge me, they don't whatever, you know. These people talk about how metal gave them a sort of home, this place to belong. And I feel like I never really had that, you know? And I'm not saying like, oh, poor me, you know? Where's my home, you know? I just feel like, I feel like in a way, like, I'm more comfortable not finding a metal home because I find it more fun to find stuff in other genres and in other kinds of stuff in general, you know? But I guess, Chad, do you want to kind of continue this? And then
I got plenty.
Do you want to say? I mean, if you really want to,
no, go ahead. I'll go last.
Okay, go ahead, bro.
Okay,
you know, I knew you wanted to, but I was like, I already asked you. So
there's a lot that I want to say about this community type stuff, but
give it to us.
Man, where do I start?
Where do I begin?
I also don't feel like I grew up with like a metal community at all. You know,
yeah.
I'm very individualistic and whatnot, but I do want to share a couple of stories, but before I do that, I guess me personally, I felt more judged by other metalheads and stuff than like non-metalheads at times. Not always, not an absolute, but like there, and I think because like it was like one or the other. Either look like a metalhead, join the club, and then you'll be accepted, or don't. Now you're just another normie or whatever. So I felt like I could. So I remember I would have more pleasant conversations about music, talking to a kid that's just wearing normal clothes, and then maybe he likes Pet Shop Boys, or maybe he likes, I don't know, Led Zeppelin or something, you know, just general stuff. But then I always was almost like this person, I like his personality, he seems like a pretty humble, normal kid. Now I'm going to try and convert him. Okay, he likes Pet Shop Boys. Okay, I'm going to try and go the melodic route. Hey, you might like Camelot, you know, whatever. Like, we were always like, because I kind of firmly believe that, it's funny, I kind of firmly believe, you know, it's like, but I do believe that everybody could be a metalhead if they found the right band, like, for them and whatnot. I don't think that metal is only for an elite few and that, you know, the rest burn and, you know,
suffer.
Yeah. But in terms of community, I never had that community. And since YouTube didn't exist, since the social media didn't exist, you were alone. You were by yourself with what you enjoyed.
Yeah.
But I will say, I don't have a strong... I'm not super into like metalcore, deathcore bands and whatnot, but I do want to shout out a band that I do respect because I don't know if you watch and know the band Adalia, but I used to work with the singer of Adalia. His name was Jorge, and we worked at Burger King together and whatnot. And it was really cool because, you know, we would share like different metal stuff, and he would show me his music video that him and his band did, and I was like, oh man, that's really cool. And, you know, after like a bunch of hit and misses, like I would show him something, he'd be like, that's pretty cool. You know, he was being nice, but he just wasn't into it. And then he'd show me like Job for a Cowboy and all this other stuff. And then I'd just be like, that's cool, you know, because neither one of us wanted to just dog on the other person. And one moment that I really enjoyed was we were making burgers, and Aha was playing, and we were both like singing Aha, you know, Take On Me. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of cool how in Aha the drums slowed down, and he was like, yeah, I never noticed that. That's kind of cool. And I told that to him, you know. And if there's one way that community could be established, it almost feels like you have to be adopted or something in communities, or befriended or something, because that was the closest I ever got to getting into metalcore, was the friendship that Jorge granted to me. And it was never like, I remember showing him Leprous, you know, the Bilateral album and stuff, and it just didn't stick really, but he was a really cool guy. And he, to think that like, okay, the metalcore kids on YouTube and hearing them, I'm like, you know, but then to talk to someone who's into that face to face and actually plays in the band, you know, a metalcore type band or whatever, I was like, man, he was a really cool guy.
Yeah.
And so like, I guess it can be established that there's community.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a lot of community growing up.
Yeah. What's funny too is, do you mind if I keep going?
Go ahead.
What's funny too is like when I think of like community, you know, metal as a genre doesn't seem to be like a mainstream sort of genre. So you're just not gonna find maybe like a million kids at all. Like I'm not gonna find half the kids that I meet or something being all into Sonata Arctica. You know, it just isn't like well known enough in order to have that happen. But like the only community is really kind of us three, you know,
Yeah.
or like our friend,
Yeah.
our friend Jake, and maybe like that's enough. But
and we even have a lot of different tastes, like in metal.
yeah. So it's just kind of interesting. But I found kind of similar to you, Kevin, that I found that a lot of times people that were more open minded, I'd be able to kind of get along with or whatnot. Whereas a lot of metalhead people, it always felt like some kind of like competition. It always felt like some kind of weird, like, you know.
Do you know the names of the bands?
Dude, Metal Crit.
Yeah,
Cloud.
it just seemed, it seemed like a little bit more like, I felt like, and maybe I was this way too, but I just felt like a lot of the metal people that I met in high school were always trying to prove themselves. There's this kid that was like, I'm so good at guitar, man. I played guitar so fast that the cameras that were recording me started blurring. And I'm just like, do you realize how dumb that sounds? Like, come on, man, you know? And like,
pretty metal.
but it was just like people were just, and I think that just kind of goes to people's high school insecurities. People were trying so hard to impress each other, to like that they would even say stupid stuff too, you know. And I don't think that was like only a metal thing. I think that was just a people thing, you know. Like, but as I've gotten older, like the metal community, I feel like has kind of like I found people like online that were like into metal and stuff. So it's kind of like I found people that we could talk about music and whatnot, and that's been pretty cool. So it's not like I don't feel like I'm so outside of the community, so to speak, but I see so much conflict and so much disagreement, so much like
confusion
and whatnot that I just feel like, and maybe it's supposed to be this way. We're, as a community of metalheads, we're not united in what we all enjoy. There's a few things we all are, like Black Sabbath is the first metal band, Iron Maiden is awesome, Metallica is fudging great, you know, like the first, you know, like there's like few things that like nearly every metalhead person, but like
we'll agree on.
Yeah, that we all kind of like agree on.
We're like, okay.
But like, but at the same time, like I think that it's okay to question even those things too, you know? Like we were talking earlier about like, are there metalheads that don't like Iron Maiden? Because would that make you not a metalhead if you didn't like it? And I was kind of like, that's interesting because, you know, I feel like you could still be a metalhead even if you don't like a famous band or something. You could still be a metalhead if you like a bunch of other metal music, you know, like, I don't know. So anything you want to say, Kevin, or do you want to take it away, Chad, as far as like, what are your thoughts on metal community and all that?
I guess with community, same with you guys. Like I never, I think you guys were the only ones, and then you guys ended up moving in like the beginning of high school, and most of the people I hung out with, it was always punk or rap. It was weird. Like I didn't have a lot of people listening to metal with me, and I'd get like Trent and Mason into some of the new metal bands because it was a lot easier. But like as far as like thrash metal and death metal, like barely anything.
Yeah.
And I don't know, as far as the community goes, I don't feel like I ever really had one. I feel like I was just kind of on my own, just searching all these different bands and different sounds and just looking for what I was looking for. And don't get me wrong, like I would love a community, dude. Like if I seen someone wearing a Cannibal Corpse shirt, I'm like, like I love that kind of crap. Like there's even this dude I work with at work, like this older metal dude, and we'll talk about Slayer and freaking death, and it's awesome. Like I wish I had a bigger community with metal, but like you said, I think there's a lot of division. There's a lot of things to argue about, but and kind of go back to what you said. I wish people were more open minded. I wish people would listen to people more, but you're just, I don't know, you're just not going to find that for most part. And and I think also like not really using social media as much. I'm sure I could find like that little space where I'd fit like in perfectly. Sure. But I'm kind of fine not having that, like just being friends with you guys and like sharing your guys' music with me sharing my music with you, like and I've found so much different stuff that I enjoy. And what if I just stuck to metal? Like I don't know exactly, like I wish there was more of a metal community, but I'm kind of fine where I'm at the same time.
I kind of feel like you're super metal because every time you're in the shower, I can hear in the other room metal being played, music being played. In the car, you're always playing music. And when I hang out with other people, they're not as dedicated about like, I mean, even just doing this channel with us.
Yeah.
Like, we've been doing this like albums. There's not a lot of people who will sit there and go through a full-on metal album and talk about it. And shout out to Werner in Germany, because I don't know all of his musical background and interest, but he's probably a metalhead because again, it's something like you earn it, and it's the depth of your I mean, I guess it's a very intense, it's a very intense experience. And like, I think like metal is very taken seriously, and nobody's going to go through a whole album or even one of our videos if they're not hardcore in some way, because it's a lot of content. Like when we did Les Miserables for 5.5 hours, that's a lot of content. But there's people who just love metal music, or even just music in general, and they're hardcore. Just being alone, listening to those albums, that trait is important.
Yeah. I wonder if another aspect of a metal, I'm going back to the first question, a metalhead person is somebody who, like, over a long period of time has still found, like, such love and enjoyment out of metal, you know, like over the years or whatever. Because I know of some people that are kind of like, oh, yeah, that metal song's pretty cool, you know, but they're not really metalheads because they're not ones that actually listening to the albums. They're not actually, like, you know what I mean? They're kind of just casual about it. Right. Like, it does seem like a lot of metalhead people just absolutely love it, you know. And I think in a way I fit in that camp too, because while I love all other genres and stuff too, I've stuck with metal for the last 20 years or something, you know. And it's pretty cool, you know. Should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Alrighty. So the next question is, how is genre in metal determined? And basically the three parameters of this is metal genre determined by its culture? Is it determined by music? Or is it determined by lyrics? And this might be a really long one, so I think I'm going to have you begin this one.
Me?
Hear your thought. You know,
I'll give kind of a simple, straightforward answer, but then as we talk, it might bring about more thoughts and more. I think for me, I want metal genres to be based solely on the music, how it sounds. It's weird to me that, and we were talking about this earlier today, but it's weird to me that Sonata Arctica, with a lot of the keyboard solos and stuff, is in the same sort of genre as like Primal Fear, with like no keyboard solos. And I'm like, that seems really different. Or those that've got the neoclassical. And I think sometimes people want to judge things solely on lyrics. There's people that really are in the lyric camp, or there's people that like, well, how do you look? Do you look like this? In goth metal, you need to look like goth in some way or something. And I'm like,
lots of pictures of graveyards.
You know, like black metal. Like I don't. I mean, even Eson saw that everyone was doing the corpse paint, and he stopped doing it because it was like everyone was doing it. Yeah. And I don't like the whole consensus control, and that this genre is this because that guy's got corpse paint on. And I'm just like, yeah, but what does the music sound like, you know? And so I'm very much into the camp of like, I want metal genres and stuff to be defined by their music. I want to be able to listen to, okay, the drums are doing this, okay, the guitar's doing this, you know, whether they do or don't have piano, keyboards, what is the bass, all of that, what's the tempo, and then I can be like, okay, once I've gotten all my musical information, boom, this is death metal, or boom, this is grindcore, or whatever, you know? Like, I want things to be defined by music, but that's just me. Like, you know, other people might want to define it in other ways. That's just how I like to define it.
Yeah. What do you think, Chad?
I'm gonna lean with Kevin on this one. Like, and that's the thing too. I know you guys do have more of an ear for music than I do, but I can still like differentiate. Yeah, you know, I can still like tell the difference between stuff. And like with vocals, with music, I like to do that. But then like there's also like the aesthetics, like the corpse paint, the bracelets and stuff. Like if someone wants to have fun with that, I don't mind. But like when you start saying this is the uniform you have to wear for this, that's when I'm kind of like, screw that. But and as far as lyrics go, I don't know. I was kind of thinking about this. Like, what is it kind of for me? Like, a lot of the stuff I listen to is like extreme. Like, the music is very extreme. It's fast. It's heavy. It's brutal. And I'm trying to think like, would any like lyrical subject, whatever, just like fit in any of that? And I don't know, honestly. Like, I'm not sure.
You asked a very good question earlier today. Like you asked, like, can a death metal band write a love song? You know, and I think that's a really good question, and it's not a loaded question. I think it's an honest question.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, I'm the kind of person that's like, well, I'm okay with having lyrics in any genre. I know there are people out there who are like, you know, death metal, they got to talk about religion and violence and gore. You know, and I don't like, you know, thrash, you got to have some political, you know, and talk about war and nuclear, this, you know, like I don't like genres being shoehorned, canonized into, you know, if you talk about these things, then you have to be this kind of band.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to hear a death metal song about a love song.
Like a legit love song, not like a joke one.
Right. Not like I love your dead corpse. You know,
like something where you feel like actually this death metal music is purveying like a feeling of love. That'd be interesting.
If a band could do that, holy death.
Yeah,
I like Hypocrisy's very depressing type songs and stuff. Now they're not doing love songs, but like Death Row, No Regrets. You know, the feel and the atmosphere of some of Hypocrisy's, like, or the embryonic. The two songs on the self-titled Hypocrisy album.
Oh, Disconnected, Magnetic Corridors.
Yeah,
and Pale Empty Spheres.
Pale Empty Spheres, thank you.
Yeah, I love those songs.
I like that, and I'm totally cool if death metal has more like soft-sounding stuff, but it doesn't have to be poppy. It doesn't have to be, but then would that destroy the music for the genre? I don't know. But I just. I mean, the love song might be bad. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Can it be good?
Right.
Like,
you know, I don't know.
Fit?
Yeah.
Like, go for it if they want, but that's what I'm trying to think. Like, is there a reason there's certain lyrics in certain genres? Like,
I do think that maybe certain lyrics just fit easier with that music and stuff. But I don't want the consensus being like, no, you can't write these lyrics.
This end all
like,
be all or something.
Right. So if it just so happens that death metal doesn't have any love songs, I'm okay with that because that's just how things played out. Yeah. Like, why fight against a river? Why fight against the flow? Yeah. You know, I just don't want there to be some laws that all the death metal fans are like, no, they're no longer death metal because they have a song about this, or they're no longer. You know, I don't like any of that kind of stuff. Like,
yeah.
So some of my thoughts on that question about how genres are determined, I feel like sadly a lot of it's just cultural, you know? It's weird how like in the past or whatever, somebody will just like someone who writes like a music column will suddenly say like, oh, this music just thrashing around, you know, or something. Like, I'm not saying that's how thrash is invented, but it's weird how certain things are like invented. It might be, you know. Yeah. But like, you know, like, it's weird how genres kind of get like determined based on sort of like events that happened or something. Like shoegaze determined because the person was looking at their looking at all their pedals on the ground to switch the pedal to create the sound of shoegaze. You know, it's interesting how like a genre name will kind of come. And then also it's interesting how that genre will sort of like morph or change like kind of over time, you know. And this is something that we've been talking about a little bit, like some of the like 70s like hard rock kind of bands. At the time, people would be like, "Oh, this is metal and whatnot." And then looking back, we're kind of like from our perspective, because we know like since 1980, there's been thrash, death metal, black metal, like doom metal, like all this stuff that's kind of like expanded from some of those bands that were if you asked any lay person, they'd be like, "Oh, that's not metal. Of course not. It's like classic rock." They weren't calling it classic rock back then because it was new, it was fresh, you know, it was interesting. It
wasn't quite classic yet.
Yeah, it wasn't classic yet, you know. So it's just kind of interesting how genres are determined by some of those things, and I feel like in some ways I kind of get frustrated with how genres are done. Like, for example, new wave of British heavy metal. I don't really like how genres are basically determined by a certain group in a certain place. Like, if somebody was like from America, you know, but they were making music that sounded exactly like the new wave of British heavy metal stuff, I feel like there's got to be a genre that can encapsulate both of these sound, because
follow the sound, not or even the Swedish death metal, the Swedish
they
Yeah.
have Finnish death metal,
Yeah.
Swedish death metal.
Yeah, like
where you come from matters.
So many times genres are determined by age, like what period it came out in, or like what country did it like come out of, you know what I mean?
Norwegian black metal.
Yeah, like, and it's just kind of like, and it's just kind of like, it's weird because it's kind of like, and then all of a sudden something came out 20 years later, but it still has those characteristics that does, the same everything, and yet it can't share that same genre as that, and I think that's kind of a weird thing in genre as far as like how you determine.
Should genres be separated through decades, through times? I mean, we talk about like 80s rock, 90s rock, 2000, we kind of do that for other
Kind of
stuff.
Era-based,
Here's where I think that sometimes
But then you have a bunch of new bands bringing back that old school sound. So then what would you do?
New wave of American thrash metal.
Yeah. But here's the problem with it. When you have like I don't know, I guess like those like pre-metal days or whatever, like those bands that kind of shaped metal into what it is or whatever. But then you have nowadays there's genres called like post-metal and whatever, and like all of these sort of like final sort of sounding genres, and it's like, well, what happens after post-metal, and it's kind of like I think I understand and I'm not no expert on this. For me, I feel like post-metal is probably similar to like post-rock, where it's more about creating atmospheres and using your instruments in a less conventional term to build texture rather than like hitting like kind of like discernible notes and stuff, and focused on like build-ups and stuff like that, like the post-rock kind of stuff was,
Right.
But it's kind of like, it's weird when you have a genre called post-metal.
Right.
It's weird because then you're kind of like, what do you do after post-metal, like...
Well,
it's
the world is going to end, so I
Yeah,
guess they were like, well,
this is it. Like, this is it, But it's just kind of weird how genre is so fixated on place and time, And I think that sometimes it can help because it can be like, okay, if someone says that this is new wave of British heavy metal, a person that kind of knows that genre, they're kind of like, okay, this is going to sound like that,
Right.
But I don't think it's an end-all be-all thing to describe every phenomenon in metal,
Right.
and I feel like metal should have a genres determined by music most. I think the lyrics, I feel like the lyrics are a place where you can be more creative in a sense, and granted, in music, you can combine genres too. Like, I have no problem with saying that something's like a blend of death doom, because it's got some elements of death metal and some elements of doom metal, I think that's fine to sort of explain sort of like some of the gray areas of
Like
bands.
hybrid bands.
Yeah, the hybrid kind of
Fusion
bands.
and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Another problem too is progressive metal and avant-garde metal are both a little bit hard to determine. Back in the day, progressive metal like had this sort of identity of like, okay, progressive rock was like pushing the boundaries, long songs, great story arcs, Operation Mindcrime, story kind of themed albums and stuff. And then suddenly progressive metal was kind of like following that. But people had this belief that like progressive metal was about progressing, doing something new. And it's kind of like there's that interesting bit of like, okay, well, is something still progressive if all they're doing, if they're doing the same thing, if they're running the same treadmill that's already been run before, or is it only progressive if they're actually progressing in a new way? That's a problem with the genre tag in general. I think we generally think of progressive metal as challenging kind of metal music that has different time signatures. And like sometimes kind of like blends sort of like different kinds of instrumentation,
Maybe
like
a saxophone.
maybe a saxophone. You could hear like a flamenco guitar part in a prog metal song, you know, and people wouldn't bat an eye. And then same thing with avant-garde metal, where people were kind of like, this is like experimental metal stuff, where it's just kind of like, well, avant-garde stuff has to be like, throw the book out, this is so bizarre, this is so different, it's almost like hard to categorize.
I think you bring up a good point, because I always thought that like stuff like Unexpect, Modeling of the Well, Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum, all this kind of weird stuff and whatnot, it's like, I remember when like avant-garde would sometimes be thrown into progressive metal, and then progressive metal, like the descriptors weren't always super clear, or Arcturus or whatever. And then we were like, well, this doesn't seem like this is not like Dream Theater or Symphony X or whatever. And that was really confusing, not knowing exactly. But it was one of those things where I think people were just like, well, you know it when you hear it. This is avant-garde, or this is, but it it was kind of a weird time because
Yeah.
a lot of bands in the late '90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of weird stuff happening.
Yeah.
And
A lot of like experimentation going on too. Like I mean, like Dan Swana was involved in the '90s with a lot of like genre kind of pushing bands. Edge of Sanity and Panthymonium, you know, like those were all kind of like pushing kind of like. Because he was a fan of progressive rock, you know. I think he said Rush was like his favorite band. I think that's what he said. I don't want to put words in his mouth. Who knows, you know. But like, it makes sense why somebody who liked challenging music wanted to expand extreme metal in new, different ways, you know.
Right.
And it's kind of like, and another kind of like problem that it gets into is like sometimes we hear that everyone starts saying this is prog metal over and over and over again, that everybody just believes it. And sometimes those kinds of bands or genres don't get challenged enough, you know? And you're kind of like, why is everybody saying that this band is like melodic death metal? Like, I don't really hear that. Like, but then because it's like everyone's been saying that for so long, it's just kind of like, I get a little bit wary of like how much the culture and how many people start saying that this is this and this is that, when I kind of think that maybe it should, because sometimes some folks like, you know, and this goes back to Rate Your Music. Rate Your Music has kind of a voting system for you to determine what the genres of an album are, you know.
So
and I think
that's literally how they get their tags and stuff.
Yeah,
people
I mean,
vote?
yeah, people. I think that's how it is determined. Like, I think the genres themselves are sometimes like created and then like submitted to like, I don't know, Rate Your Music committee to either like accept it as a legit genre or not first.
There are like artists and things where stuff will be challenged. Like this tag or whatever will be challenged, and then it'll...
And you click on the genre of the album, and it'll show all these users say, yes, this is Death Doom. And then all these users say no. And if... So it's kind of like, okay, if genre is just determined by...
Explain what camp you're in with the Dark Tranquillity...
yeah. This is a good example. And I could be wrong, but this is kind of my thinking. So the problem
lost.
No, I might have. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, it's not determined yet.
It's not determined. I mean, I've asked questions. Okay. No one's responded. Like no one's voted on it. You know. So here's one problem. So Dark Tranquillity, and I'm not saying they're a prog band. They're not a prog metal band. But they definitely have some progressive like tendencies, you know? That's what kind of made some of their music a little bit more challenging. Nobody could listen to The Gallery one time and say, I got it.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
That's impossible, you know?
I'm a big prog metal guy, and I would have a hard time remembering some of what was going on with Dark Tranquillity, because they would like slip certain notes here and they would do this, but they're seen as just just another Swedenborg melodic death metal band.
Yeah.
They can't be prog. And so I think that's where this cultural push is coming in.
So what Kevin's referring to, why he's bringing it up, is like, so for Dark Tranquillity's Character, that album, and we were listening to it the other day, like, I don't know, 6 months ago or something, Kevin was kind of going through about, like, here's what time signature they're doing here and whatnot, and I always knew that Dark Tranquillity did kind of dabble in, like, different time signatures, so I was kind of like, okay, well, if you got a song where they're in 4/4, and then for this section they jump to 5/4, or in this section they jump to 7/4. This part they're doing like 6/8 time. You know, all of these different time changes throughout the album Character. So then I was kind of like, I added as a descriptor different time signatures. You know, and I think that people probably don't want to say that. Because they're kind of like, no, that's for prog metal, you know? That's not for melodic death metal. You know, melodic death metal is like, you know, simple stuff, you know? Right. But it's kind of like, and it makes me wonder, do people like not understand music theory enough that they can't argue about something that they don't know? If you're listening to the Character and you had no idea what time signatures they're doing the whole time, how can you argue about whether or not there are time signatures or not? Right. And that's kind of the problem with having the sort of like, discussion of like, oh, well, the majority says no, even if there really are a ton of different time signatures in the album.
By the way, I'm with you with what you see.
Yeah,
like
it's kind of like the argument with like people like say like, you know, Metallica's Injustice for All is like has some prog tendencies, you know,
right.
And it's kind of like, yeah, I think that's there. I don't think it should be like prog metal, but I think that it is kind of like a little bit like, I don't think that you're like crazy for saying there are some progressive elements to this, you know?
It bothers me when people say Symphony X, oh yeah, they're just a power metal band.
Yeah.
It bugs me so much because I'm like going through all of 5 of the New Mythology Suite and I'm like, dang dude, listen to Communion and the Oracle, listen to Egypt and tell me it's just, you know, it's just...
Yeah, because...
But I think you're right. I think culturally... I think there's this quest for simplification
Yeah.
of like, no. Like all these hybrid bands or all this whatever. No, just throw them in power metal. Just throw them into death metal. You know. And I'd much rather have the complicated answer instead of the false simple answer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah. And I think so many times culture or the masses just want the simple answer, you know? And it's kind of like, oh, you must be wrong because like tons of people, like a person could be right and just 20 people are just like going with the crowd. That's not very metal, you know? Like, you know, so it's just, and it's not that big of a deal. I'm not checking Rate Your Music every day to see if the character has those. Yeah, you know what I mean? But it's just kind of funny because it raises these sorts of questions of like, does the music community in metal understand what they're listening to? Do they know how to say that this is this genre and that genre? And I'm not saying I even have all the answers.
Yeah.
But I do want to have those discussions with people, you know, because I feel like in the internet age, sometimes I'm not like a dominant voice there. But if you have somebody that has like a channel with millions of views or they're in the scene for a long time, even if they say something, no, man, this is this genre. Everybody will be like, oh, well, he knows, man. It must be gospel because he was in the scene, you know, he knows. Like, he freaking met, you know, the Iron Man, Bruce Dickinson, you know, so he must know what he's talking about. And I find that so many people that quote unquote are the like gatekeepers or whatever, I find that like they're fallible also. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they say things wrong. Sometimes I say things wrong. That's why I feel like there should be this sort of check. The conversation, this check on different things, you know. And sometimes those people will get roasted by, you know, like online people.
Somebody
Is like,
critique
oh, this,
video,
you know,
like, oh, take this, buddy.
yeah, you know, and they're like, nah, you know,
And,
and it's just kind of like, I think that's a good process to try to figure things out, you know, because I don't really like just relying on some authority to say this is what it is, or you know.
I can understand, like, especially for people just getting into metal, like, they want some answers. So I'm okay with, like, yeah, you know, this is like this.
Here's the simple answer, here's the deeper one.
Right. You know, I'm okay with having some answers. I'm not... It's just that sometimes it doesn't seem very metal to me when you're looking for a mommy figure or daddy figure to tell you that this is this metal, this is that metal. And I do wish it was more of like I'm convinced there's a lot of people that don't really understand what they're listening to, you know, and maybe that's why they rely on lyrics to determine what things are, or the cultural consensus, because they just might don't have the ears for it. They just know it makes them feel good or something, but they can't differentiate between what the guitars or drums, you know, it's just
they're not musicians, so they're not going to be able to be like,
and so I sympathize with that. And I'm not saying that my view has to be the end all be all thing. It's just that I want this also to be part of the conversation. That's all, you know. It's like we're not trying to overthrow whatever culture's happening. It's just that there are some things understood in metal culture that could be wrong. So why can't we talk about it or something? You know.
Yeah.
What was even the question, guys?
The question was, how is genre in metal determined?
Okay,
you know, is it culture, like, you know, music or lyrics? Do you guys want to talk more about lyrics? I feel like we haven't covered lyrics as much, like how important lyrics are for metal genres and stuff. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, what is the role of lyrics in metal, anyways?
I don't want to jump too much into like power metal lyrics and stuff because like that could be a whole
like, save that
like
for another day.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day. The role for lyrics, I don't really. Again, I'm not the strongest lyric guy, so I don't feel like there has to be a set order of lyrics. And some of the lyrics that I enjoy with metal is a lot of historical stuff. Mythology, storytelling. I'm a big storytelling kind of guy. Like,
you're the biggest.
I like it. You know, I like all that, but I don't really have a, you know, like, oh, lyrics need to be this or that. I don't have any.
Yeah.
And there's even bands where like I completely let them slide. Like the lyrics will just be cringy and stupid as crap, but the music's hitting the right spots and the vocals are hitting the right spots, and I can kind of whatever with the lyrics. Yeah. But then there's other bands where like the lyrics are really important to me, so I don't really know what I'm trying to say with that, but
Yeah.
I guess lyrics are important, but not always.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on it?
The thoughts I was thinking of was like, I love when bands break so-called rules in metal genres and stuff. Sonata Arctica is probably one of the clearest example because people lump them as a power metal band, but they don't have lyrics about like fantasy and freaking dragons and all that kind of stuff, you know? So in a way, it's just kind of like,
They do have like fantasy metaphors.
yeah,
you know?
yeah, that's true. It's not like they don't have any kind of like imagination.
The Boy Who Wanted to Be a Real
Yeah.
Puppet could be a fantasy story,
Yeah.
but
It's not the traditional power metal fantasy.
Yeah.
it's a story about be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
you
it's a
know.
parable.
It's a
basically.
parable. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
But a
like
metaphor's a
anybody.
parable.
Yeah, and it's like any metal band could sing in metaphor and parable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you've got like Rainbow, you know, on Rainbow Rising. There's a song about like this wizard guy who's like, you know, doing all this crazy stuff and then he dies or whatever, you know, and like the story of the song or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Man, I can't remember the name of that song, but yeah, those stories can be used to like share ideas or share like, you know, kind of different messages and stuff. And I think that's pretty cool. And I think that I don't think that's like I don't think that's personally like a metal thing per se, but when it comes to popular music, metal does cover darker subjects that popular music really doesn't, you know.
Yeah.
Hip hop will cover those, so I think that may be an important element of lyrics for metal is covering a lot of topics that are much more darker, covering the darker parts of human nature. But I don't want that to be a staple saying that you have to be dark and edgy in order to be metal, you know. Yeah, and there's some kind of like you know, I don't really like how metal's canonized to be like, if you have this lyric or you have this whatever, then you must be this band. If there was more bands that like kind of broke lyrical rules or whatever, like you guys mentioned with the, you know, a death metal band writing a love song, I think that would be really cool because it would kind of like push the genres further into how we like perceive those.
Then
you know?
all these people are probably thinking, no,
Yeah.
don't, no.
It would be so weird though, but I mean, hey, if someone made it work, like that would be just insane.
Well, here's what's funny though. Like older people, like when they hear like growling vocals and stuff, immediately they think that these lyrics have to be about like evil or destroying or evil stuff. Yeah, you know? And it's kind of like, it's so funny to show those people what the lyrics really are. And they're like, whoa, that's pretty cool. That's really thoughtful. You know what I mean? And but it's just interesting how music genre itself can almost give a cue to people mentally about what is this song about. You know what I mean? And
our mom was like that, you know, growing up. She didn't like the guttural vocals.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it sounds dark. It sounds
My
evil.
mom always just called it angry music.
Angry music.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
You know?
And it's funny too because like I think you could use like irony and stuff in music, you know? Like Radiohead does that really well where they have lyrics that are about like denial, you know? So the lyrics would be like, you know, like I'm not here, this isn't happening, or like Fit or Happier, you know? Fit or Happier, you know, like eat, you know, not microwavable foods or whatever, you know, but the song sounds kind of like disturbing or something. Yeah, you know, so you kind of know that like sometimes the irony of like, you know, I'm gonna be happy. Power of Dreams, when we were talking about like, now that you're gone, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But you're not very convinced that this guy really believes that because of the irony of like the sound and whatnot, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe metal can proceed or be better if I think that they had a little bit more lyrical sort of like, I don't know if irony is even the right word, but a little bit more complexity and not just fitting what the sound is.
Yeah, not so on the nose.
Not so on
like the lyrics match the sound.
Yeah,
I'd be down with
like
that.
if you had a power metal song that's all soaring and whatnot, but the lyrics were like not about soaring and life stuff, you know,
and,
or death metal lyrics that were not about like, you know, brutal whatever stuff, you know. I'm open for that. Like I think that is cool, and I think that some bands do kind of like say a little bit more than just what the music kind of sounds like, you know. So those are kind of my thoughts on lyrics. I don't want lyrics to determine genre so much. I want lyrics to allow more freedom within genres to do more interesting things.
Right.
You know. Should we move on to the last question?
Yeah, let's do it. This is going to be a long video, but that's okay.
That's okay. It's fun to talk.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about a lot of this stuff, and we'll do more videos of just kind of Q&A stuff. You know, questions we ask ourselves. You know, because it's nice to discuss some of these things.
Get it out in the open.
And see what people that are watching also think about this kind of stuff.
That would be the coolest part. But
because
if we, if that happens, that happens.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Because sometimes it's easy to be in your own head and your own experience, and then someone can say something, and you're like, "Oh, that's a good point."
I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's true. So the last question is, what is your opinion on old metal culture music versus new metal culture or music? So this is kind of the old versus new world. I'll let you start with this one, Chad.
Okay.
On the spot.
I know, right? I don't know. I feel like I have some roots like in the old, so I think that like that traditional metal sound kind of carries me more because I never got into like the metalcore or the deathcore. But then again, I did get into new metal. But thank you, Dad, for playing lots of classic rock and metal around me.
Yeah.
Shaped me in a good way. I guess what are you asking with the question? Like, what do I think about it? What does it mean?
Yeah. Do you feel like what do you think the difference is between new metal people, like metal culture in the internet age versus metal in the old school days? In
the old school days, it seems like, I don't know, I look back at that like fondly, like, man, I wish I was there. I wish I was go to these thrash shows when Megadeth and Metallica were just first coming up, and seeing Slayer with their freaking makeup and playing fast as crap. Like, I wish I could have experienced some of that stuff, but at the same time, like, I do feel like we're kind of in the middle, like growing up, like being kids in the 90s and then being teenagers like in the early 2000s. And as far as new stuff goes, it's kind of weird because I'll talk to people and nobody's really talking about the artwork or the lyrics or the physical media. It's all Spotify and streaming. And like, don't get me wrong, dude, I stream tons of stuff before I like decide if I want to buy something. Of course I do, which is makes it easier to find music. But like I kind of miss like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I miss like going to a CD store and buying like being like, oh, this looks cool. Let's freaking check this out.
Yeah.
And then bringing it home and it's freaking awesome, and like checking the liner notes and seeing what bands they recommend and then going back and like I miss the excitement of CD stores. Yeah. Like, dude, in Reno, when we'd go and buy stuff, you'd freaking have like stacks, dude. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just fun, man. It's just brick and mortar, just something to do.
Do you feel like the old school had a little bit more of a ritual sort of kind of practice?
Exactly. Like, this routine, this ritual that you'd go through. And like anytime I was even bummed out, I'll go buy an action figure or a CD. Like back in the day, like it cheered me up. And it's nice going online and everything's instant and it just gets there. But I feel like there's something missing from it for me anyways. Yeah. But as far as like comparing it, I guess I look back on the old stuff a lot more fondly than on the new stuff. I'm just like, dude, like, I don't like where a lot of it is gone, and I don't know like where it's gonna go. But at that, I'll let you guys take over from here. If I have anything else, I'll kind of.
Yeah, I kind of like this question because this is something I was thinking about maybe a week ago, and I was talking to you like on the phone, and I was really pumped up and amped of like, man, this bothers me, and I was thinking about our like YouTube channel and what are we doing, and why does our voice matter? Do our opinions matter? And then there's this kind of overwhelming like, hell yeah, it matters, because I was thinking about it. We weren't a part of the pioneers in the 80s and whatnot, but we're not in the pioneers for newer stuff, and whatnot. But where we are, I actually think it's kind of a cool time to be alive, because I think that we're kind of pioneers in our own way. And I think because we sort of grew up with the internet, like we got the internet when I was like 7 or 8, you know what I mean? So I remember playing outside a lot growing up. And then when it came to getting into music and whatnot, you would have to go to stores to buy it or there'd be word of mouth. You couldn't get into stuff the way that you can nowadays. Yeah. And whenever you did like a band, you would like burn the CD and give it to someone. And I feel like that sharing of like burned CDs, that's so much more the 80s guys of sharing mixtapes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we gave so many burned CDs to people and whatnot. Yeah. And the ways that we would find music is like those CDs in the liner notes. Like it's so important that bands would be like, oh, we thank, Overkill, we thank Sepultura for touring with us, and then you'd be like, oh, let me check out, right, and then you'd be like, oh man, let me, check out some of this stuff. And so I feel like we're kind of pioneers in our own sort of regard, because we didn't grow up with the social media, YouTube age of finding stuff, but how we found stuff, it was kind of, I'm happy with when I was alive. I'm happy with where I was, because it instilled more of like this, I don't know, gratitude of like what we were able to get into and how pure it all was. The only way I could get into Helloween was listening to a 30-second clip on CD Universe. Or Circuit City back when they were in business. They would have a 30-second clip, and they wouldn't even have all of the songs sometimes. And then you're like, I really want to know what this sounds like. And there's 30-second clips that I remember, like the Sonata Arctica Blank File is a great one, because that 30-second clip was like, it ended with the solo. And then it would just fade out, and then you were like, what happens next? I don't know, but that sounds cool, because it was just like that solo section at the end of the soloing in Blank File. And even Helloween's like Rabbit Don't Come Easy, there was parts in there that I was like, whoa, and so it was really cool to get into music little bits at a time and have these little teasers. And then
once you get the whole thing, you just freaking dive into it, and it's just really exciting.
And you had to do the work. You had to do the legwork. Like, we would go to CD stores, and like I got into Steel Attack by looking at a CD album in the store, and like, oh, Steel Attack, Where Mankind Fails. Oh, cool. Excuse me. And I do like the older stuff, and I do like how accessible the new age culture is, but it's weird because I don't know what it is about today's culture, but it feels much more collectivist. And I don't know if it's just because people want answers, want simplified views or whatever. But I feel like even in metal, there's this collectivist mentality with new age metal type stuff. And that's the stuff that bothers me about new age metal, is all the collectivist stuff about how you should perceive music, how you should, get into this, and you will definitely like this. And then like, what, you don't like this? And it's just, I don't like how it feels like everyone's being funneled down an assembly line of what to get into. And it was more like the Wild West. And I know it was like the Wild West in the 80s too, where, you just go to, my friend just, was like, hey, come to this show with me. And then an opener band was like,
pretty cool.
Whatever, and so I feel like we grew up in a cool time, because we had a lot of the Wild West still, but we also had, the emergence of YouTube and the emergence of social media, where, I got into a lot of bands through YouTube and sharing whatever. But we also got into a lot of bands doing our own legwork, trying to find things on our own. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think with this question, I do think that there is something to do with like the internet causing everybody to sort of like in the olden days, there's a huge difference between availability to not available. Of course, I love the accessibility of metal. I hated having to pay $50 to Japan to get a CD from Skyfire. Right. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. There a lot of that stuff was so hard to find, and with the internet kind of opening things up with everybody, it has caused everybody to be able to find new artists that you never would have heard of. Some Bandcamp band I could hear of, and I'm like, man, only like 100 people or something, it seems like, have ever listened to this or something. Yeah. It would be cool to like check these guys out. And then I'm like, oh, this is awesome, So I do feel like a part of metal culture, accessibility has kind of opened the gateways for that. Some of my like, I guess, hesitancies or like fears about that though is we had different gatekeepers back in the day. Sure. It was like the like labels being like, we're gonna point the and that's definitely kind of the internet age. But like in the old day, in the old days it was the labels that made it so that you either like heard a band or didn't hear a band, or it was the tape trading, friends, word of mouth kind of stuff. And nowadays, word of mouth and sharing still is a big part of it, and the internet has made that much easier, because you could just send somebody a message online and be like, check this out, you know?
Right.
You didn't have to like,
Or
you know,
text with a
call
link to
them,
a song.
bike to their house and be
Yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
hey man, check this freaking mix
Yeah.
out I made, you know?
There were no cell phones. There was
Yeah.
no texting.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
none of that crap.
none of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a way, I feel like the problem with today, I feel like, is the self-appointed like gatekeepers of like whatever's popular is going to be the one that has the most voice, you know. And I totally see that as like not a problem that you can be corrected. How can you correct something like that? Is like obviously all of us love and enjoy, you know. It's like a good problem to have, you know.
Especially
Obviously,
if it's its own emergent phenomenon.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it just happened naturally. Like,
yeah, you know, fans just love this band and they kept pushing them, and then now all of us are into like Metallica or Megadeth, you know.
Right.
Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. I just think that sometimes with the internet, if you have a giant voice, sometimes it's hard to like hear other things or whatnot. I like hearing alternative opinions and alternative views and stuff. Yeah. And it
bothers me in this day and age when there's like, I don't hate these newspapers and whatnot, and I don't hate like Metal Archives, you know, but like when I'll read something on Loudwire or Metal Sucks, you know, and then I'm just like,
You suck.
you know, it feels like it's just like Rolling Stone magazine, and it's just telling you this is the best guitarist in metal.
Yeah.
This is the best drummers. And for the longest time, man, I had people coming up to me telling me the Blink 182 drummer, you know, Travis Barker was the best drummer, and that's because of how popular he was and how culture enforced that then everyone was just like, he must be the best one. Everyone says so. You know? And that bugs me that like I don't get me wrong, I know that there's some metalheads that work for these magazines and whatnot, but sometimes their articles and whatnot, I'm just like, oh, dude, you guys are wrong about this, or you guys are, or I'm just like, this is like your opinion, man, and you guys are stating it like it's fact, and they'll do like these little, it just bugs me, you know.
And the thing is, it's the reason why I say that it's a good problem to have is like, man, there was a time when we didn't really have that, you know?
Yeah.
When someone could write an article and say 10 best Danish bands, you know? We didn't really have that. It was so like inaccessible, you know?
Yeah.
The only thing is like, I think people with the internet have found that they have so much power to communicate ideas, you know? And that's the reason why, like, if you look at best Danish bands, you know, like you got like King Crimson on the top or something. Or not King Crimson, excuse me, King Diamond. Man, they're like, oh, he ain't a metalhead. Confusing King Crimson and Diamond, whatever, you know. I actually think King Diamond's pretty cool. But anyways, you know, and then all of a sudden that article, millions of people look at it, and then everybody's like, well, King Diamond must be the best, you know, and or whatever it may be, you know. Best thrash albums, top 5 are like Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, or whatever, you know. And it's like, that's cool that you could kind of communicate these things to people so much easier. I'm just fearful or like hesitant of like the idea that we all must agree that this is the best, or we all must agree that this is this way. And I love when people push online bands and albums. I wish people in the underground knew how powerful the internet was and would promote like more obscure bands and whatnot, you know. And you know, I mean, that's kind of why we wanted to do this channel, you know?
Right.
We wanted to promote bands that are a little bit more underrated, like underappreciated, more obscure, because it's just kind of like, this is a powerful medium to do that, you know? And even if we only reach like 10 people, you know, that's 10 more people than we had before, you know? Like, so it's fun to do that. And I'm not dogging on what's popular. I love all the stuff that, not all, but a lot of the stuff in the metal world that's popular, I'm like totally down behind, you know?
You can totally have like a cynical view on the internet age and everything, because like, and I'll get cynical sometimes where I'm like, yeah, you know, top 10 thrash metal albums, and then I'll see the one where it's like top 10 unknown thrash metal albums, and then I'll find that everyone's got the same unknown bands and whatnot, like and then just because you threw an unknown, or just because you threw in like, you know, whatever these words, then I'm just kind of like, oh man, when you've got like a consensus conformity on what the top unknown bands are, I'm like, that's a problem. Like, you know, that's a real problem. So I do appreciate every once in a while there's an article that come up and there will be a band that I'm like, oh yeah, I hadn't heard of them or something, maybe a newer band or whatever, you know. But it just bugs me that even the so-called unknown stuff is becoming codified and becoming, you know, like,
and it's like, I'm not saying that nobody should stop talking. I think everybody should talk. Like everyone should use their means to communicate
it's just there's some bands that all the newspaper, all the consensus, they don't want to talk about. They don't want, like, it. For me, Mind Odyssey is a band that like no one talks about, and I'm happy that Dolly's Dilemma, for instance, like this diehard guy, I had to search for it because I'm like, dude, no one ever talks about Dolly's Dilemma, and this guy searched and he was like, man, what happened to these guys? I liked them, and he like hunted down the band members and stuff because they disbanded after like 2000 or 2001 or whatever. He hunted them down, asked them questions and whatnot, and I was like, that dude is keeping
awesome.
Dolly's Dilemma alive, because nobody cares. You know, and I'm like, if that guy wasn't doing that, and if other people weren't, like even us, if we weren't doing stuff, then dead bands would stay dead because there wouldn't be a voice for them, you know. And it, anyways, I won't go into Dolly's Dilemma, but it was cool that like there are people out there who are
keeping
fighting
music alive, and,
you know, and that's really cool.
And that's metal, you know.
That's metal.
So
but I agree though. I think that and one reason why I think I'm approaching it is, dude, I have treasured and loved how much people have been able to show me stuff that I never would have found on my own, you know? And I want to be able to do that for other people also, you know? I want to be able to share stuff that I think is freaking awesome so that they could enjoy it too. And if they don't like it, then that's okay, you know?
And I think everyone you can have your own, like, here's the individualist talking, you know, your own special island of metal and your own view and your own whatever. And it is nice for us doing this channel and to share that special view, that unique view to us. You know, like it's kind of cool. So So I think, is there anything you wanted to add, Chad, to that, or should we kind of wrap it up? Yeah.
I think that sort of wraps.
Here.
I think that wraps up our questions. You can kind of see that we like talking about this stuff. We're pretty passionate about it. It's really fun. And you know, we don't have all the answers, but it's fun to just at least talk about this stuff. You know,
just get it out in the open and discuss it. And,
just see what happens.
Share your thoughts and whatnot if you want to. If not, that's fine too. You know. We've got some pretty cool stuff happening in 2023. You know, we really do. Like, should I say a little bit?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I mean, it's up to you.
So,
you know,
of course, we're still going to do albums like we normally do.
Yeah.
But, you know, we do want to do some more different videos. And we're still brainstorming on what videos we want to do. But we are going to do like a collection kind of video, which will be kind of cool. That will probably come around in like February or something. But you know, I like this kind of Q&A type of video as well, because then we could talk about subjects and you know not be confined to whatever the album is that you know. But we're still gonna do albums, and so I'm really excited for 2023 because 2022, like, we only had about 6 months there, and a lot of those videos, it was awesome, like doing it, like, I guess with both of you guys, really. You know, it was really cool, you know, and ending 2022 with Layman's Rob, that was awesome.
Hardcore,
man, you know,
like,
and
right there.
And I'm already thinking, like, if we keep doing this, like, man, what are we gonna do as like a awesome a finale for 2023, you know? And so, but those of you who are watching and commenting and whatnot, like, we appreciate hearing your views and whatnot.
But we'd definitely like to hear more. So
Yep.
Any other words, or should I wrap it up, or?
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm good. I'm good too. Thanks for watching. We're gonna just keep on keeping on, and this is Forgotten Legends of Sound, and I hope you guys have a good 2023.
Stay metal.